Okay, so today we're reviewing polynomial basics, so everyone remembers what a polynomial is. However, I'm just going to review a few things that maybe you have forgotten since we last talked about polynomials. So first of all, the degree of a polynomial is given by the term with the greatest degree. So if you remember, you look at the variables and you look at the exponent. So this is x to the third, x to the second, x to the first, and you find the one that has the biggest number. So since this is x to the third, that means that that's the largest exponent, and the degree of this polynomial is the third. So the third power. So it would be a cubic function, and we would say that the degree is 3. Also, just a reminder, when you write your answers, you should write them in standard form. So whenever they just have one variable, meaning they're all x's or they're all y's, you should write them in descending order. So from the biggest, so x to the third, x to the second, x to the first, and then no x. Okay, so just remember to do that when you give your answers. And again, that only applies if there's only one variable. If there's an x and a y in the problem, then there's not really a specific correct order. Okay, so another thing to remember is how to classify polynomials by degree. Some of these might be new to you. You know about a constant function that has a degree of 0 because there is no variable, and an example would be like -3. Linear, you talked about linear functions a lot in 8th grade, in 9th grade, last year in math. Many of you talked about that a lot. So those have a degree of 1. For example, x plus 2 doesn't have to be x, it could be y, m, but it just has one variable in it. A quadratic, which we spent last semester talking about, is when it has the highest degree of 2. So for example, x squared plus 3x minus 8. But even if it didn't have 3 terms and it just said y equals x squared, that would still be a quadratic. So anytime it has x squared in it and the highest degree is 2, that's a quadratic. Okay, then we go on to cubic, which you might remember cubics when you graph them, they look kind of like a snake. So a cubic is the 3rd degree, and it means that the highest one in there has a 3. So this would be an example of a cubic function. Again, it doesn't have to have 4 terms, but does have to at least have one that has x to the 3rd, and that would be the highest degree. These ones might be new to you. You have a quartic with the highest degree of 4, and here's an example, and a quintic, which would be the highest of 5. So a -10, x to the 5th, etc. So this is how we classify polynomials by degree, and once we get past 5, they don't really have specific names. We usually just basically use these names, and past 5 we don't give them specific names. We would just say it's a degree of 6, a degree of 7, etc. We also can classify them by the number of terms, which I'm sure you remember, but just a reminder, if it only has 1, like this in the orange here, that's a monomial. If it has 2, we can call it a binomial, and if it has 3, we could call it a trinomial. So you could actually call it a quadratic trinomial because the highest is the 2nd power. And this, since it is to the 4th power, that would be a quartic binomial. So it's kind of like triangles when you can name them with 2 different terms. Okay, so hopefully this helps you kind of remember about the polynomial basics and how we call them, etc. One other note, the lead coefficient, when you've put it into standard form and it's in descending order, this very first one out here, that's the leading coefficient. So the leading coefficient is the one that's in front of the highest term. So if these were not in order and 3x to the 4th was over here, the lead coefficient would still be 3. So make sure you remember that. It's always the coefficient that's in front of the variable with the highest term. All right, see you later.